and I keep messing up.
Okay, you are live.
Yeah, I would like to convene our monthly meeting of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission. I would like to express a special greeting to Alderman Rob Savage, who is joining us tonight to talk about Resolution 1-23. I really appreciate your joining us, Alderman, to hear your thoughts about this issue and give commissioners a chance to respond to any questions which they may have. The first item of business, which we'll, I think, deal with quickly, is the approval of minutes from our last meeting. Those were provided to you via email. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes shall stand approved by common consent. It is the practice of the commission when we have a guest to adjust the agenda so that we give our guest the opportunity to present to us very early in our session. And so with the okay of the commission, I'm going to extend that to Alderman Savage. He is going to talk to the commission, speak to the commission regarding Resolution 1-23, which he has introduced and which also has 4 sponsors. And that represents a majority of the city council. Basically, the purpose of the resolution is to tie the workforce housing issue to the development of the pending Annapolis Comprehensive Plan. So with that, Alderman, thank you again for joining us. Give you the opportunity to give us your thoughts as to why your resolution is merited at this time.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, and thank you to the commission for the invitation and for allowing me to go earlier. I do have a 7 o'clock community meeting I'm going to get to here soon. But this is an important issue, so I wanted to make sure I could attend. So to start off, I just want to apologize if Alderman Schandelmeyer may have went over some of this, but just to brief you on some of the history of the affordable and workforce housing issue in the city. We have done a number of things over the years. We do have in place a moderately priced dwelling unit program, and that program applies to new development if it's over, I believe, well, we changed it so it's anything over 4 units needs to comply with that MPDU, moderately priced dwelling unit program, and that's where they have to have, forgetting the percentage, but I think it's about 10-12% of the housing needs to be moderately priced. And so over the years, we have increased that percentage. We also removed a loophole that allowed developers to pay a fee in lieu to avoid having to build any moderately priced housing. And we also, a couple years ago, I think it was Alderman Schandelmeyer who introduced accessory dwelling unit legislation. And so we did pass that a few years back as well to kind of expand some of the housing options out there. So I think one of the things to start off with would be to define workforce versus affordable housing versus below market rate housing. And that's something really the city has not had well, at least the council has not had a good conversation about what those things mean. Now, what I've seen other jurisdictions do in some of my research is they've had defined workforce housing as about between 80% to 120% of the median income, and that works out to be roughly $80,000 to $120,000, and that's what they often consider workforce housing. And as a side note, I think it's, I don't quite know if that's appropriate in the sense that I know our teachers do not earn that when they start off, nor do our firefighters or police officers. So I think we really need to look at that definition. And there's also affordable housing, which is usually defined as less than 80%. Often it's around 60% or lower of the median income. And then there's below market rate housing, which is also similar to, it's basically workforce housing, except below market rate is broader. It's not just meant for a workforce. So those are things that other jurisdictions have done. One of the things you'll hear me mention, our comp plan does not, at least one of the drafts I've seen, does not currently make the distinction between affordable housing and workforce housing. Those terms are often used together when I'm not sure that's really what we're talking about. So in any case, just to offer, again, another summary of 04022, which is the legislation that Alderman Schandelmeyer and Alderman Gay have introduced. That would apply, and I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit, so I apologize, but that would apply standard for our R4. We have all these different zoning districts, R1 through R4 and commercial, industrial. So what it would do is apply the R4, which is, and the higher you get up in the number, the more density the districts have. So R4 has the most density, R1 has the least amount. That's your typical single family. And so what it would do is apply that R4 standard, bulk standard, what they call it, to all the other districts. And pretty much it applies to all the residential district, and it would apply to all the other districts except for industrial and I'm blanking on what the other, there's one other one that's not included. And so it's pretty broad scope. And the county did something similar, but they did not apply it to all of the residential. They just applied it to one additional residential district. So what would this look like? The bulk standards mean that, so for R4, it allows specifically for apartment hotels. Now that I'm not entirely sure if that use would be allowed with this legislation, but it does allow the density that is similar to those. And so what it would look like is that the way this is written, there's no limit on height as far as number of stories. And if they went above 5 stories, they would have to go through a separate process, the plan development process, but it doesn't prohibit them from going above those stories, unlimited, the 5 stories. It also does not limit the units. The units would be limited based on the lot size. And I think I should have looked this up, but I think it's about 1,200 feet, I think, per unit is what the minimum size would be. And so I calculated on my lot, and we have a small lot over here in Georgetown Grove. It's what are these lots, Diane? Like a 1/4 acre, 1/8 an acre, something like that. But on lots our size, it would allow potentially between up to that 3 to 5 units or more on such a small lot. And so, but there was one of the questions we asked about that legislation is it doesn't really. People had different answers as far as what it would look like. Some said it was more intended for large properties where you would have many dozen affordable units or workforce units, I should say, and on some of these larger properties. But others said, oh, well, no, it's meant to increase the number of duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes we find in our neighborhood. So there wasn't really a clear answer on that, what it would look like. And the other big question is, where would this happen? Where would this development happen? And that's where also we didn't get a clear answer. No, Planning and Zoning and the commission did not say they didn't really know where this was going to happen. And that really, to me, is not planning when you can't actually say where it's going to happen. They did say the limiting factor was cost. And so keep that in mind, because that's an important thing I'll mention a bit more. So cost is going to be the limiting factor. So then you have to ask yourself, well, where are the parts of the town that have the lower property values? And so again, I'll get into that a little bit more later. But just to highlight some of the concerns, and I'm bringing this up because these are things, this is why these concerns are what's driving the resolution that I introduced with the 4 co-sponsors, because we want to have more dialogue and more planning. And so first of all, one of the main concerns is, for me, I've always had a lot of concerns about the impacts from growth. In this sense, impacts of density, impacts on our infrastructure. And so, as you may be aware, we have adequate public facility requirements. So, for example, if somebody wants to build development in the city, they have to make sure they have adequate police, adequate fire, adequate traffic, adequate sewer, adequate school capacity, stormwater capacity, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, that does not kick in unless they're building 11 units or more in one project. And so, since this legislation, the 040 legislation, would apply to the entire city, you very well could have a community where you would get a number of triplexes, quadruplexes, et cetera, more and more, this high density, without any kind of assessment of what the infrastructure can handle. And that's where, again, I think proper planning would really help to address those growth concerns. Because you have to also ask yourself why, if this is going to happen in the areas of the town that have lower land values, is it really appropriate to be having this be built in some of the frankly poorer parts of the town and have those residents have inadequate subpar infrastructure? So is it fair to have them allow them to have subpar, again, school capacity or subpar policing or subpar whatever, traffic impacts, those kind of things? We really need to focus on building community, and that's again why I think planning is important to this whole thing. Another concern is gentrification. The way this 040 is structured is it would say that they can build this housing, but 40% of the units in the housing on the property would need to be, so 40% would need to be between that 80 and 100%, 120% income. So they'd have to make, the renters would need to make between the 80,000 to 120,000.
That's
So
ridiculous.
40% of the property, and then so the other 60% of the property can be market rate, which, as we know, is often pretty high in Annapolis. And so it's, again, if you're building this in, this is, if we're being told this is going to go to low cost areas in the town, the areas with low property value, you're potentially putting in gentrification, where if 60% of those units are going to be market rate or above. And so
Right.
that's why, again, I think we want to look, the co-sponsors on R1 want to look to having this be done so with the comp plan, so we can look to make sure we're not going to be inadvertently gentrifying communities. Another third concern is again, I kind of alluded to, is it's concentrating workforce housing in certain parts of our ward. We heard a lot of people from Ward 3 who had this concern, because again, Ward 3 has the lower, some of the lower property values in the city. And so this is something that DC looked at, Washington, DC, that when they did their study for workforce housing, or I think they called it actually below market rate housing. When they did their study, they first looked to see how the housing, workforce housing, was distributed, or below market rate housing was distributed throughout the district, because they wanted to make sure it wasn't concentrated. They wanted to make sure they had equitable distribution throughout the district. And that, again, is something you can do through planning and comprehensive planning. And so another concern, fourth concern, is that it bypasses, again, our comp plan process, which I've been alluding to, which I think really ends up leaving the public behind and the whole process. A fifth concern has to do with how it just, again, ignores that the effort to build consensus among the council and among the public, which I think is really important for land use decisions. And just to tie up my concerns here, I just want to say that most of these issues I mentioned, I believe, can be addressed through planning and through the comprehensive plan. So, why should we risk gentrification, risk social injustice, inequity, just to say we did something for workforce housing? I don't think it's such an urgent crisis that demands action now, as opposed to taking just half a year to do it right. And so that's where R123 comes in, the resolution. And this really, what we want to do is start the conversation with this council and the public to define housing needs and priorities. Do we want workforce housing? Do we want, and what amount of it do we want, and where do we want it? And also, or do we want more affordable housing? And again, where would we want that? So we need to define the exact housing needs and the priorities in the city. I know Alderman Arnett's mentioned wanting to make sure we have addressed some of the homeless situation in Annapolis as well. So the other thing, so the resolution would start the conversation by calling for a council work session on this topic. We did this recently with the police adequate public facility conversation, and it really was a positive, productive conversation. The legislation, my resolution also sets a time frame, because we don't want this to drag on and on. This is important. We're not at all trying to kick the can down the road. We're just trying to do things in a way that, again, we're not going to have any kind of unintended consequences, and to do it where we can try to build consensus. And so that's also the reason why this resolution calls for a community. I can't remember exactly what I called it, but it came from our last comp plan in 2009 had a community advisory commission, and that the representatives on that commission would review and review the comprehensive plan and make recommendations to the council as far as changes they may want to see. And I think that helps to build buy-in to the comp plan. And to have a comp plan that's really successful, we need to have something everybody can agree with. And so in the end, I just want to end with saying that the resolution is really meant to support the effort for identifying housing needs, such as workforce housing, and not to hamper that effort at all. We could frankly kill 4022 right now because we have enough sponsors to do so, but instead we want to continue the conversation forward. And so that's the motivation behind R1, and I hope that the commission would consider offering some support behind that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Savage, for your remarks. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the alderman? I'd like to mention that we have 10 of the 11 commissioners present on tonight's call, as well as several other individuals, including Carrie Berger from the Office of Law, Tricia Hopkins from the Office of Human Relations, Lakeisha Hatcher from the County Human Relations Commission, and Najeri from the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. So we've got a really good group this evening. Do individuals, do commissioners or others have any questions that you would like to address to Alderman Savage regarding his resolution and his presentation this evening?
I have a quick question, Alderman Savage. Is the thought that 040 could be included or potentially included in R1 if the plan I guess gets legs and potentially addresses that in the future? Is that what the thought is?
Well, right now they're separate efforts. I don't think 040 can be salvaged because frankly I'm not sure how to amend it to address these concerns. The only way to really address these concerns is through the planning process. And so ideally, and frankly, I think I'd rather see 040 be withdrawn with the understanding and just for the sake of, again, trying to build consensus. I've had to withdraw legislation in the past before when I've realized I just didn't quite have enough support for it. So the hope is we'll bring R1 forward and past, but we'll still have a conversation about some of the ideas and proposals that were embodied by 040. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Leach.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if you if you answered this. Were you saying with your resolution would be 3 to 5 units on possibly a quarter acre of land lot?
That's what the 040, the ordinance you
Oh,
heard
that's
about.
not yours. That's not yours.
No,
Okay.
mine
But-
just establishes calls for a process where we have a dialogue and have a conversation with our comprehensive plan to actually plan out housing changes. It doesn't call for any specific policy.
Okay, so you would be totally aware of the environmental impact of on the number of units on a quarter acre lot, right?
Yes, ma'am. And that's something that, again, one thing we would look at hopefully through the comprehensive planning process is to make sure if they're proposing to increase density in any parts of our town, that there are sufficient environmental controls and traffic,
Right.
roadway infrastructure, that kind of thing. Parking.
Yeah, but things like stormwater runoff from a lot, depending on what kind of roof they have and what you require on the property. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's part of the adequate public facility assessment.
Right.
And that's where that doesn't get triggered unless they're building 11 units or more. And so,
Okay.
but we can look at that through the comp plan process as well.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Mundy?
Hi there. So my understanding was that adequate public facility rule is the current rule. That already, if you tried to build more than 11 units, then that's when, you do that assessment. So is that true? That's not part of the 040. Nothing's changing there.
Right, that is true. That is currently, yeah. But
Okay, because
yeah.
you were
But again,
making
the
it sound like it
problem-
was 040.
Sorry?
Because I thought you were making it kind of sound like it was part of 040, that it was changing that.
No, my point with that was that the amount of development proposed by 040, which would allow individual lots to get built up, again, individually instead of collectively. And so if they're built up individually, where it's 2 units here, 3 here, 4 there, 5 there, they don't have to go through, they don't hit that 11 unit threshold because they're
Right.
individual projects.
Right.
That's one of the concerns I have.
And then my only question really, I think, is when you talk about your resolution is to have a conversation, I feel like I would like to hear more action than conversation. So you're talking about asking the comprehensive planners, whoever they are. I don't know who they are at this point. But asking them to do that research of how is affordable housing distributed, and all the other questions you had. But in my mind, if that comprehensive plan isn't done until the end of summer, which I think somewhere in the resolution, it says that, and then you start having a comprehensive plan, then we go into next year, or a conversation, then we go into next year. I mean, and the fact of the matter is that the 2009 plan suggested that we get our act together here in Annapolis on, this workforce housing. So are we going to just be put into another whole cycle of talking about things?
Well, hopefully not. I mean, that's the
Should
whole,
be.
I mean, both as you said, the 2009 comp plan, as well as the Housing Affordability Task Force, both recommended action, but they did not have specific policy recommendations. And that's where all they said generally is that we need to look at changing our zoning codes and the districts. And so that's where, again, I think it's hard to do action on land use without the associated planning. And that's, again, why I tried to emphasize the concerns we had, because I think it's counterproductive for us to, to make the land use changes when we risk increasing gentrification, increasing inequitable concentration of housing around the city. Those are counterproductive to the underlying desire to have more affordable and more workforce housing in the city. You know, we've seen historically the bad practices of planning like redlining, which have contributed to a segregated community and racist policies. And I think it'd be a huge mistake for us to, you know, have similar risks happen again, like gentrification, or even like, or unfairly burden some of our existing residents, where it may not make sense to put some of this housing in parts of our community where we don't have adequate infrastructure like parking. And so those are the things that I think we need to look at through the plan and comprehensive plan process. And I don't think that doesn't have to mean it's going to be a long process. I mean, the comp plan is already being reviewed and developed right now. And, you know, admittedly, that's not going to get passed, I think, I think not till towards the end of the year is what they're proposing. But again, I'd rather do it right. And the comp plan, we could certainly include a very specific policy recommendation. And if we have that in the comp plan and the council votes on it, the community buys in, that means theoretically we should be able to pass whatever the recommended action is pretty quickly and pretty easily with the community buy-in and the council buy-in. And so I think that's a much healthier way to do land use.
Lakeisha.
Yes, Commissioner Hurley.
Lakeisha had her hand up.
Oh, okay.
I can wait after Commissioner Hurley. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner
Chuck's on-
Helen.
Chuck, you're on mute.
Sorry, there we are. Alderman, yeah, I understand. I think I understand the complexity of R1, R4 through R4 and the various, you know, affordable workforce, et cetera, and the comprehensive plan. But bottom line, do you think today we're doing an adequate job on affordable housing in Annapolis?
No.
No, not at all.
Okay.
What you see around the city is most of the new housing is all 600,000 plus. You know, I think we need to make sure that the new housing has prices that are all across the board and that will reach all segments of our population. And you know, I think that's something that we definitely need to figure out how to improve.
That is how much of the current, let me get there we are, I'm back on the screen. How much of the opposition in city council is based on the not in my backyard approach?
I don't think anybody's taking that line. I mean, everybody on the council has supported increasing the amount of workforce housing. We've been pretty clear, like I just have with all of our concerns. And these concerns, again, I think are manageable. And I think it's just worth taking our time to build consensus. That's what's going to really help to get around some of this not in my backyard concerns that we may hear from community members, is that by bringing them into the conversation, listening to their concerns. Because I mean, unfortunately, the way 040 is being pushed is that anybody who opposes it is being called names and in order to dismiss their concerns. And so I think we need to make sure we hear everybody, and that's how we move forward together.
The final question, at one point you mentioned that you didn't see enough urgency to justify the the workforce housing bill. I think I sense more urgency perhaps than that. It has to be done right, everybody agrees. But what would the deadline be for action by the council?
Well, that's something that we can certainly set. And I think if the public thinks we need to set a firmer deadline, we should do that. I think once we get the specific policy recommendations from the comp plan, that will help. But I do think, you know, I don't think it's a crisis that warrants doing things in a risky way. I do think it's important to do, but again, I think we need to be deliberate.
Right.
Ms. Hatcher.
Alderman, I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Commissioner Hurley was kind of leading to in regards to the number of pushback that you are currently facing. Is if it's more residential, is it political? And then also, has analysis been done to state how, if there will be any kind of depreciation of value, being that now it would be spread across the board, and you do have some homeowners that have paid out at the high value of their homes, and how that would affect the value, or across the board, if there's potential decrease in value of properties based off of the policy for the workforce housing. Like, has there been any analysis of how that would look if property would be devalued with this policy?
No, there has not that I'm aware of anyway. But again, I think that's something that we could ask our planning staff to look at through the comprehensive planning process. But I also think that's a reason to make sure we have an equitable distribution of all types of housing, is to make sure that any kind of potential impact to land value, good or bad, can be spread out throughout the community. And I think, again, we heard that a lot from folks in Ward 3 who were concerned about impacts this could have on as far as driving up property values and property taxes. That's again, that goes back to gentrification concerns. But I missed, so can you repeat your first question? You were asking about resistance?
Yeah, exactly. If you have, even with the initial discussion, receive a little bit of pushback or resistance from residential and or some of the political affiliates.
Well, there has been resistance, but I think that comes out of, so for example, in my community, my neighbors had concerns about, it wasn't not in that backyard, it was concern about the impacts of density, and again about the concerns about adequate facilities, and as far as making sure that if housing densities increase, that we make sure we do plan for adequate parking, and address some of the associated concerns with school capacity, with all the adequate facilities. But I know the resistance is different depending on the community, for sure.
I do appreciate that, the willingness to listen to everyone across the board in regards to this, and not placing people in you don't want to see equity. I do appreciate the fact that you want to hear all voices in regards to that. I think that's a good plus up.
Well, thank you. And just to throw out another idea as far as different approaches to this, is Alexandria, Virginia. I've been speaking to one of my constituents who used to be on the board of visitors and governors down there, which is their county council equivalent, is that they've actually had great success with opening up commercial property, because a lot of commercial properties became vacant through COVID pandemic. And so those are ripe opportunities to have a work-live opportunity. And so that might be a good one policy we can look at, again, in the comp plans, identify properties where that might make sense, and then get a specific policy passed. So I do need to run soon.
Yeah, are there any additional questions for Alderman Savage? Alderman, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This has been a very enlightening discussion and conversation.
Well, thank you again, Chairman, and thank you to everybody. Have a good night.
Good
Thank
evening.
you.
Okay. All right. We've now heard from proponents from both sides of this issue. I think folks have pretty much got a sense of it. What I'd like to do, with the indulgence of the commission, is to, before we get into a a conversation and presentation and all this is to return to our agenda, where I do have a report, what I'd like to share with the commission. Claudia is, I guess, not able to be with us this evening, but I just wanted to mention that she was extremely helpful to the commission in handling a complaint which the commission received, which was really quite different from any other complaints, which pretty much we have gotten in the past. It involved the issue of residential parking permits and parking fines, and differing opinions by the complainant and the city's Office of Planning, which is overseen by the Department of Transportation. And after consulting with the Complaints Committee Chair, Helen Leach, we both agreed that this was a case that we thought would be better turned over to a staff member of the city of Annapolis to see if they could work out some equitable and an acceptable solution. And Claudia Barber did a fantastic job, at least in my view. She was able to get the parking folks to basically waive the cost of the second parking permit. They were able to get one of the fines that had been imposed on the person to be withdrawn, and also provided information who she could contact to get the other fine taken away. We were unable to resolve the dispute between the parties in terms of their deportment during this entire process, but I think that Ms. Barber deserves a strong round of praise, and I'm sorry she's not here tonight to hear this, but I'm sure Tricia will pass it on to her. She really did a really good job in handling something that I think would have been difficult for the commission to deal with. We don't do this very often, but this is one circumstance which I think it was helpful, and hopefully the matter has been resolved. But if the complainant comes back to us, they will take another look at it through the complaints process. But I think that the work that Claudia Barber did in this instance was really quite exemplary, and certainly want the minutes to note that.
Mike, would you like me to ask her to circle back with you, as to the resolution and if there's anything else that occurred?
I don't think so, because she already has.
We got that.
I mean, I am not aware of any additional complaint which has come in from the complainant. If there has been something that has come in, then the answer would be yes.
Well, I would seriously doubt if Claudia received anything at all that you don't already know.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
She's very quick to act.
Yeah, but the other party was told that if there is anything else that you would really want the commission to deal with, to submit a copy of our complaints procedure, outline what the additional concerns are, and we'll take a look at it. But I have not heard anything, and I suspect that I would have heard something by now.
Okay.
But if there are additional concerns, then we'll take a look at it. So I would like to then, I guess, also as part of my chair report, to express thanks to Mark Hildebrand of the City of Annapolis Television for providing us with the technical support that makes this meeting possible. There is Mark on the screen. Hi, Mark. Thank you very much for your help with this. I would like to just very, very, very briefly provide, and for those of you who read the executive summary of the report of the Housing Affordability Task Force, some of this is going to be duplicative, but it still, I think, is important for us to take a step back from these two competing resolutions in City Council and sort of look at what the big issues are here. And I think there are issues that definitely do impact the work that the commission does. The Housing Affordability Task Force really came back with what I counted were four major conclusions. The first is that housing costs have increased at a much higher rate than household income and throughout the United States. That Annapolis is outpacing most comparable cities in terms of housing costs. That third, that on what you could call a price to income ratio, the price of the property, the income of home buyers, when it comes to purchasing a house, Annapolis is one of the most expensive cities in the United States, and that rising housing costs hurt not only residents, but cities as well, because they drive consumers away. And what are some of the reasons for this? They include limited space for continued development, poor urban planning throughout the city's history, widening income gap among our residents, and wealthy investors buying up property. Just to share something, and I have a feeling some of you have heard this as well. A month does not go by when I do not get a telephone call, either on my message machine or if I get stuck answering the phone, in which somebody on the other end says, I will pay you a good amount of money to buy your house. And I tell them the house is not for sale, it's my home. Well, I can give you a very good price. And sometimes they are realtors working for the people. Sometimes they are principals. One even knocked on my door once. This is stuff about wealthy investors going around looking to buy property and willing to pay a lot of money for the property is not just an urban legend. At least I have not found that to be the case. Now, with respect, just to summarize, the two pieces of legislation that are before City Council is the one we heard from Alderman Schandelmeyer last week. That's 04022. And basically what that would do, it would create workforce housing that is affordable to households earning 60% or more of the area's median income. And a good summary of his comments appear in the minutes from our last meeting. And folks remember what he said. You can read a little bit on that. And then, the proposal from Alderman Savage, which is coming as a resolution. That would very, very simply, what that would do, it would postpone action on any changes to the housing code and zoning districts until it can be addressed in the impending Annapolis Ahead 2040 comprehensive plan. Right now, the status of these two pieces of legislation, with first of all the 04022, which is sponsored by Alderman Gay and Alderman Schandelmeyer, that legislation is still in the Housing and Human Welfare Committee. And so far, the committee has developed 22 amendments to the ordinance, according to my latest count. And there may be additional amendments. So the authors of 04022 are working to go through a whole lot of amendments to try to broaden out the appeal for their legislation. The way it stands right now is that a majority of the council, 5 members of council, have signed on to the resolution which you heard Alderman Savage speak to tonight. There's only 2 members who are sort of on the fence on this issue. But I see hands raised. Commissioner Mundy, you have a comment? Oh, you don't. Okay. The way the thing currently stands politically is Alderman Savage, who is the introducer of the resolution R123. He has got a majority of the council right now supporting this. However, you have 2 members of the council who are sort of on the fence on this issue. One is Alderwoman from the first ward. I just did a blank in terms of her name. And that
Ellie Tierney.
Ellie Tierney, yeah. Yeah, she's on the fence, and I suspect the reason she's on the fence is if you took the time to read through the testimony on at the one of the 2 public hearings that occurred as a result of this resolution. They had a huge 2 public hearings on this. One of the issues that was raised again and again were residents of Truxton Heights, who apparently are now in Ward 1, but they would be moved to Ward 6. And there were a lot of people who came in there very, very upset about that. And my guess is that Alderwoman Tierney is probably thinking about that. You know, a lot of people really upset about that. So that might be one of the amendments they're working on. I don't know. And then on top of that, you got the mayor. The mayor is not committed on this, and the mayor can sway votes. If he came down in favor of this legislation, came down against the legislation, I think the bill's in real trouble. But right now, the mayor has not played a card on this one. And I just might mention also too, in that with respect to the testimony that was given, most of those who testified at one of the 2 public hearings on this issue testified in support of the ordinance 04022. However, I would mention that there was significant opposition from 2 very potent and powerful civic associations in the city. And that's the Eastport Civic Association and the Civic Association in the Parole area. And they have basically said that they could not support this legislation as it's written, the political battle on this issue is something that I think is going to continue. Now, you know, the proponents. Yes, yeah, Chuck.
I've spoken to Alderwoman Tierney, and it's my understanding she does not support Alderman Savage's bill.
No, again, she has not signed on to it, but she hasn't come out
and does not support.
Okay, yeah, she has not.
I put her down as leaning favorable on the workforce housing.
Yeah, I'm only mentioning this because her name is not. She's one of the 2 members of council who have not publicly come out. I mean, she is not listed. She has not put her name on the bill. It's only 2 members of the council who have publicly come out in support of 04022. And that is the one that's Alderman Gay and Alderman Schandelmeyer. They're the only ones. The others are either on the fence or they're in favor of Savage's resolution. One thing that I don't think was completely brought up, which I think is important to note, is that there is an intent to have a draft of the comprehensive plan for the city of Annapolis, a first draft anyway, finished by May with a final draft completed by July. And with the idea that some of these issues can be rolled into that. Now, that's the objective. We all know that timelines can be pushed back. And so, but my whole purpose in just raising this is to sort of give you, somewhat of a broader picture of what is happening on this issue. And it definitely is the Human Relations Commission issue. There's no question in my mind that this falls within our bailiwick, so to speak. What I'd like to do now is to open it up for a conversation on the part of commissioners. There's a number of options which we have on this, and some that you can think of that I'm not going to even make reference to this evening. One, we could come out in favor and support 04022. We could support R123. We could simply await the outcome of the amendment process that is going on in City Council and see what comes out of that, and whether that changes the political dynamics in any way. We could name a subcommittee of the commission to really do a deep dig into this issue, and specifically the impact that 04022 would have if it passed on the city, on residents of the city. Or we could hold our own public hearing on this issue and invite the media to cover it. And there may be other things that you're thinking of. But I'd like to have a conversation about this and see if we can move forward with a decision about how to address this issue. The fact that we had two members of City Council coming before us is a demonstration about the desire on both of the sides to build as much support as they possibly can for their respective aims. So I'm not going to say anything more right now. I'm going to basically take notes here to hear what other people are saying. And so, and this conversation can extend, beyond the actual members of the commission. For those who are joining us tonight, feel free to express your views as well. So, comments, ideas, suggestions.
I think that that it's important for the city of Annapolis to know how making any move as it pertains to housing is going to affect those who are low income, who cannot afford the housing. We know that housing is a issue here in the city of Annapolis. We know how it has affected residents. We know what gentrification has done in the past, and how that has affected individuals who live in the city. And so I think that it's important when we're delving into issues like this that we hear from the community and make sure that the community is educated on these resolutions and ask them what it is that they want and how it would affect them and what their thoughts are on it, rather than just convening and making decisions that impact the lives of residents here in the city of Annapolis who ultimately have to live with those decisions. And that's just my initial thought.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Hatch. Let's just see, Commissioner Hurley?
Although I defer if others, but I would like to offer a motion, just so we have a structured discussion and that before I think through the right words, I was disappointed by Alderman Savage statements, much of which I agree with, some I didn't, but I did sense a lack of urgency, and I'm not sure I agree with him that most of the opposition not in my backyard. I would propose the following motion, that
Sure.
the Human Relations Commission support action by the City Council to provide more affordable action properly, but at the earliest possible date.
Mhm.
Can you repeat that, Chuck? I want to make sure I capture, because this is a motion, is that correct?
It would be a motion, yes, that
Okay.
I would recommend, the motion would be that the Human Relations Commission support action by the City Council to provide more affordable housing properly by the earliest possible date.
Second the motion.
All right.
Okay, this is 1 second. Okay, all right, so the actual motion is that the HRC support action by City Council to provide, what was it that you said?
More affordable housing.
Okay, to provide more affordable housing at the earliest possible date.
Yes.
I think that's kind of nebulous. I'm not sure it's specific enough. And
Well,
maybe we aren't ready to be that specific. I don't think so. But-
Well, I
also
heard a second. I heard a second for the motion.
I
Oh.
second it.
You have to
Okay.
vote. Right.
All right, okay, all right, well, okay, we've got a motion on the floor.
but it can be further discussed. I mean, I would welcome
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, all right, okay, but we're gonna have to get back and actually, because once there's a motion, we vote on it, but we're not operating strictly under Robert's rule. So are there other thoughts on this thing? But ultimately, we can go back and we can debate the motion. And, as Commissioner Leach just mentioned, she thought it was sort of vague. And so I would like to hear what others have to say about that, but other ideas that you have on this issue.
So I agree that I was also disappointed because I did not, when he specifically said that he did not feel there was urgency, perhaps there's no urgency to pass a bill that's not addressing things properly, but there is urgency to come up with a plan, especially considering that, this has been, we've known that we need to make a plan by 2009, since 2009. And so that was my specific thing to him was, what is the action plan to make a plan? There's lots of questions around all of this still, and I do think it's important that, whatever we decide to do, that we are keeping in mind that affordable housing, workforce housing, below market rate housing, because that is, how it's all defined these days. And it is different. And this bill that was proposed by Brooks and Dewan was very specific with the workforce housing. I just really feel like it's important for the city council to know that we're watching and that we expect them to put some urgency in this and to put some dates around it. I don't think it's okay. He asked lots of questions, and that's why I was asking him, is that in the comprehensive plan? Are we going to get those answers in the comprehensive plan? If you're going to do a resolution, make a resolution that we should wait until the comprehensive plan is done, well, then we need those questions answered in the comprehensive plan too, because if not, then we're just going to wait around for them again too. And, maybe we need to talk to some people that have moved out of Annapolis because they couldn't afford to live here anymore. I think it's important to talk to people as well and to go to them and not expect them to go to public testimonies. I think it's important to go into communities that are affected and go specifically to people. So those are that's how I would propose doing that. And we need those voices.
So your thoughts then, Commissioner Mundy, would be similar to those that were expressed by Commissioner Hatch.
Yes, I mean, twofold. One, both agreeing with what Chuck said about, making sure that the city council knows that we do feel like this is critical and we do feel like there's urgency in this, and putting some dates around it and asking for some dates and deliverables. And then also, let's us do the work of outreach and really, perhaps do a little listening, housing affordability listening campaign, or just housing campaign. In asking people, going to people themselves.
Well, how about doing a listening project?
Yeah, we could. I'm
I
actually
guess,
in the midst of a listening campaign right now with Anne Arundel Connecting Together. So I just did training for it and everything. And I see Commissioner Hatch is smiling because he knows too. So
I guess I'm wondering how many actual locations within the city limits of Annapolis would be open to build affordable housing? How many locations are we talking about?
right, I wondered that too.
Okay, the other thing is that has always bothered me is no height limit. And I'm wondering if they go into a single family area and they quickly throw up a four-story building. I think that would be very upsetting to people. And I think that some of the people that are having problems with this envision that happening in their community. So I don't see that being addressed anywhere.
Well, is that addressed in any, even for a single family house? Can you build as high as you want for a single family house?
I think probably in
No,
some of
you
the new
can't.
developments, they have.
I think it has to be zoning. They have to consider the zoning and what can be applied to single family residents versus if they have
Yeah,
duplexes.
well, I'd like,
multifamily.
I'd like to know that if I lived next to an empty lot.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's a
Am I
public
gonna-
record to what the zone is considered and what could be built or developed in that area.
Right.
They do have to consider that.
And there are zoning regulations, but all somebody has to do is apply for a variance and they can get it.
Well, here they're talking about nothing. They're talking about no limit on how high the buildings are. That was
No, and-
specifically mentioned.
Well,
Rob, but actually there are already ordinances that have to be followed.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking. Like, I think before we jump to that, we first need to understand what are the actual ordinances that have to be followed, because there are some and they're not trying to get around it.
Well, by saying there's no height requirement, when they're
That's
talking
not
about
true.
it,
Who said that?
Yeah, that's not
Uh,
true.
the alderman said that,
Uh,
mentioned no height requirement.
Which alderman?
And I've heard that before,
No,
and he's
that-
talking
that's
about
just
four-
not true.
about talking about 4 or 5 story buildings.
Mm.
I think that has to upset people if
don't
they
know
have
where
an
she's
empty lot
getting that
next to them. That's a lot of cars for parking.
Well, I think this is why I think what I'm hearing is there's, or at least I'm hearing is there's a need to do a deep dive into this legislation. I mean, the 04022 goes on pages after pages after pages, and it's still
Uh-huh.
it's still a creature in in progress. So I think that one thing that the commission really ought to do is to have somebody, have a body that were a group of folks who would go through the legislation and find what exactly it says. And it's dull reading. There's no questions about it. But I think that's really important to address is there anything in there that would affect the number of lots that would be able to be built in a specific neighborhood?
Yeah,
I think it's important, and that will have to be, that would be in the legislation. So you've got to go on sort of like a treasure hunt to see what you can dig out of the
They're in
legislation.
here, right here.
Yeah.
So Mike, can I offer something?
Yeah, yes, Tricia.
Okay, so as I tried to explain in an email to you before, there are many resources that are already there for viewing. So if you research the ordinance, you'll get to see the videos associated with committee meetings, with council meetings, with any kind of public recorded meeting that's occurred around the legislation. And then if you, in watching them and listening to them, you get some reference to certain elements of the city code, you're going to want to look at the zoning ordinance, not ordinance, but the city code language around zoning, as that was already mentioned by somebody. So it makes a lot of sense to get your homework done around what's already available to you and that you can witness or watch or even participate in when it's occurring. The calendar around any ordinance or resolution is going to include what committee meetings there are that are associated with that. And it makes sense to look at the agendas of those commissions or boards that have a role in overseeing environmental concerns or zoning appeals or the like. Sorry, my dog is barking at me. It's a helpful thing to do. And then if you have questions, I mean, clearly the comprehensive plan is going under review right now. And I heard Alderman Savage say that the expected published date of that is May. I'm sure there'll be opportunities within that if you have questions to reach out to staff in planning and zoning, perhaps. Just an idea around things that you may not understand are referred to or are present in that. But again, I think your first best look is to see during the course of public hearing or in committee review what kind of presentations and comments have already occurred to give you some background in that as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, Chuck?
Yeah, I really think that the deep dive should have occurred in 2009. That the delay on this issue has, this is my opinion, has largely been due to the, not in my backyard issue, and that we urge, I see Commissioner Mundy nodding. I would even add the word, we would urge urgent action by the council properly at the earliest possible time. I mean, they have to go. No one's doubting how complicated it is. It is complicated, but it's been complicated since 2009, and delay has not moved us forward.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor from Chuck. And I'm just going to read what he says, that the commission support action by city council to provide more affordable housing at the earliest possible date, which I think has
add the word properly in there too, Mike, I think, but yes, that would be the motion.
Well, I seconded it when he first said it.
Okay. Helen, you had expressed some thoughts about that. Could you elaborate?
I don't know. I don't think I would vote on it. But I don't know about elaborating. Well, actually, Diane, it is mentioned, height restrictions are mentioned in this one, and they are not something that automatically happens, so. But that doesn't make it any better, so.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the value added of Chuck's proposal. I mean, we can pass a resolution and we can urge the council, to take action at the earliest possible time. And what I'm afraid of you're going to hear is they're going to say, good, we agree with that. And that'll be that. Where will we go from there? And
Yeah.
again, we're free to express our views. I think if we pass that motion, there ought to be specific actions that the commission can take to cause the folks on city council to expedite their efforts in this area.
Yeah, it's vague. It is vague. It should be more specific. Also, as Tricia said, there's just a lot to read here. And I wonder, has everybody watched all the testimony? Because that's really interesting too. So, and there's just a lot more to do to make a decision like this right now, I think, but
yeah,
that's just my opinion.
I have actually listened to and read through the testimony, and the testimony is pretty clear. I mean, what you have is you have quite a number of citizens who are basically saying, I work here in Annapolis, but I can't live in the city. I can't live where I work. And there were a lot of those comments, and they were very, very impassioned. And then you had, the two civic associations coming in and basically saying, well, we might support this down the road, but it better not be this bill because we won't support this bill. And, with Eastport Civic Association and Parole, about immediately, you added, you have two individuals who represent those areas, Alderman Arnett from the 8th Ward, and Alderwoman Rhonda Pindell Charles from the 3rd Ward, I believe. And they're now signed on to Alderman Savage's legislation.
And the truth. So, Mike, there was lots of people opposed for good reasons and with good points.
Yeah.
At the end of all that testimony, because it went on forever.
Yeah.
There was a lot, and they were good points, and they were not in my backyard. Certainly not from me, but I certainly appreciated the points that people made, and I understand what people are saying in their communities too. So I almost think sometimes
I agree. I agree with your assessment of that.
Is this the only legislation that is out there that provides for affordable housing? Is it only for workforce housing? Is that the only piece of legislation that is there? Is that I guess somewhat of my question is, we have known, or at least the city has known, for years upon years that there's a problem, including the executive summary that was submitted, at least in 2021, that there's been a problem with affordable housing, or the lack of affordable housing, and the housing costs becoming growing faster than the rate of inflation and growing. Is this the only solution, I guess, or the only supported kind of resolution here?
Just to be clear, my motion wasn't to support the workforce housing goal alone.
Is the only thing that's on the agenda right now.
So
particular
what
My
if
motion
there,
was not to support the workforce housing bill, but that the delay from 2009, in my view, without any action, is unacceptable. It's time for the city council to vote.
what a big difference there is between affordable housing and workforce housing? I have a daughter who's a school teacher and a single mother, and she doesn't begin to make the income that they're describing for workforce housing. So, I don't think it's even, I think that whole thing has to be re-looked at. So there's a big difference.
Although
And
I think the term that people
I think it's
recognize is that-
affordable housing that we really need in Annapolis.
that was my word. That's why I chose that word too, because I think that's the word that people understand.
You are lucky you bought your house.
Well, it's interesting, that goes back to our last meeting, when I introduced Alderman Schendelmeyer, I think I used the phrase affordable housing. And he quickly said, are we talking about the same thing? We're looking at workforce housing. And I think there is, I remember that he made
ridiculous.
that comment.
Yeah.
They're trying to keep this in the range of, we need to be accommodating those people who live in the city and have to live outside the city because they can't afford it. And I think they're trying to keep that narrowed on that point. I think that's the intent of the authors. But as I said, as was said earlier, as Commissioner Hurley said earlier, this is something that should have been dealt with, it did more than a decade ago. And the city has not, this, as the report for the housing, the workforce housing, the issue of housing affordability, is that they specifically criticized the city for, and I'm quoting from the report, for urban planning throughout the city's history. So this has been an ongoing problem.
I agree.
So the other affordable housing legislation that is supposed to be happening is the rent stabilization legislation. And we haven't really talked about that, nor have I really read about it, but that's something else that I know the housing committee is working on.
Yeah, let me give you a brief report on that. That's really not at the heart of a controversy right now. There is legislation. It's 05022 called the Renter Protection Legislation. And basically it's drawing up guidelines, and the responsibility for the drafting of that is once again in the hands of the Housing and Human Welfare Committee of City Council. But it's right now being postponed for more amendments and refinements before they voted out of committee. But it's my understanding is there's no controversy here on that piece of legislation, that eventually it will pass the council, but it still does not address the issue of workforce affordability. Maybe in limited ways it will, but the cost of renting a home in the city of Annapolis is incredibly high. But that gives you a short report on where that bill stands. It will pass the council. I was told that there really doesn't have any opposition. They just need to play with some amendments. But the one that's really catching a lot of attention and significant opposition is the 04022.
Mike, again,
I understand that with the workforce housing affordability, we're looking at houses, but there's a huge population of us in Annapolis who are renting.
Yeah.
And I am thinking that would not a focus on the rent be more of an easy win and then tackle the others? Because
Well,
if you're paying a lot of rent, you're not saving for a house.
Mike,
Go ahead. Go
let me
ahead,
be clear.
Chuck.
My definition, I think affordable housing is the term people understand, and that, in my view, would include renters. It's not just, owners, but I think it would include housing for, all people in Annapolis.
Yeah. Yeah, I
agree.
think we have joining us today, Alderman Gay. Alderman, do you wish to address the commission?
I want him so bad. Yes, so thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak briefly. I am making dinner and watching this in the background, and I just had to jump on. The first, let me just answer the first question in regards to the difference between workforce and affordable housing. The workforce housing title or definition was thrown around to satisfy and fulfill the needs of NIMBYs. Workforce housing is affordable housing. Affordable housing is workforce housing. There's no difference in workforce housing if I'm making, $50,000 or if I'm making $100,000. All housing is workforce housing. What the policy trips people up on, as mentioned by one of your commissioners, is the income limits, which then sets a restriction for workforce housing. So again, the definition of workforce housing is still the same. It's housing. The income restriction creates the barrier. Now, if you look at the chart that HUD has published in regards to the income caps that we've created, and you can find that on the city's webpage as well, and it's also attached in the staff report addendum. You'll see a chart breaking down the income requirements. So for example, when you see one, that means if a household of one person, they can't make more than $74,000. So that actually would probably work for most teachers, and particularly entry-level teachers in the Anne Arundel area. And it goes up, based off of the size of the family, just like any traditional subsidized housing program. And so I do think outside of the income concerns, which I don't, think will be an issue because we've based it off of, federal recommendation. You mentioned the concerns from some of the neighboring communities, some of which are valid. We are working through the amendments. We have 22 amendments right now for this legislation, and that may be dwindled down. I'm working with my colleagues to get everything in order. But one of the bigger concerns is that if essentially the legislation would allow any of the R1 or R2 zoned properties to play by the R4 rules, they still would be required to follow all of the setback requirements of the R4 zone. The only difference is that they would be able to accept density increases, which would subsidize the affordable part. And so I just wanted to make that clear as I was listening. Everybody has concerns in regards to, the height and the construction, et cetera. And we're working through that process in amendments. But the concerns of the two civic associations in particular are a little bit troublesome. And I just wanted to correct that.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Gay is the member of council who has introduced 04022. I would just like to ask him what role he believes the Human Relations Commission could positively play in this issue at this time. You have any thoughts about that, Alderman?
Yeah, thanks. Testimony is critically important. Reaching out to your representatives. As you mentioned, most of the pushback that we've gotten at this point has been from wards 3, 8, and 2. So priority focus on Alderwoman Pendel Charles, Alderman Arnett, and Alderwoman Karma O'Neill, who don't oppose the idea of affordable housing. I think they are supporting their constituents' concerns of overdevelopment. I'll phrase it in the best way possible. So again, yeah, testimony would be extremely helpful, both written and oral once we get back to that point. Once we get the amendments approved at the next Housing and Human Welfare meeting, which is March the 20th, though it will then be sent to Rules of City Government, where we really start playing games, because that's a tough committee. And so I'll need your support there as well, if the commission feels inclined to do so.
Okay, yeah, just a question about Ward 2. Is the Admiral Heights Community Association taking a specific stand on this issue? I don't recall reading that they have. Is that where the opposition in Ward 2 is coming from, or
not that I recall? I do not believe Admiral Heights Association did submit anything. The bulk of the concern is coming from the back that Ward 2 and 3 border the WNAV site, which is prime real estate for workforce housing development. And so there are some concerns there.
One other question too. Commissioner Kachmar raised the issue about the issue of protecting renters. That just to quote what she said that many people can't afford to purchase a home because all of their money, all the housing money, is going to paying for rent. Now I know that you do have companion legislation here on that. I shared with the commission. We're talking here about 05022. What's the status of that? It's been my understanding that there's no opposition to 05022. Is that correct?
You may get one or two no's, but for the most part, I feel comfortable in working with my colleagues that I don't want to get ahead of myself. It seems like as it's on the right path to passing the city council. I'm actually meeting tomorrow with my colleague from Ward 8 to finalize amendments for the legislation. We have had opposition from the Maryland Builders Association, and I think a renters group as well. But the unique thing about this legislation is that it's timely. A number of municipalities across the state are introducing rent stabilization. And it's completely separate from rent control. Control sets the standard. Stabilization makes recommendations, and the board follows through on individuals that may break or set too high rents. And also the state is working on legislation as well. But yeah, I agree with Commissioner Kachmar. Rents are outrageous in the city of Annapolis, and if you are subsidizing rent with 30 to 40% of your income, you'll never be able to afford a home here without some sort of first-time home buyer program, etc. And so a part of this is that thinking, if we can create stabilization in the rents, we give people an opportunity. I also have legislation being drafted right now for public safety officials that would create opportunities for them. And so I don't want to talk about that too much because it's still drafted. But yeah, I greatly appreciate your all interest in this.
Does that address the issue that you raised, Commissioner Rose?
I'm feeling much better now. I was on mute earlier and I was using very colorful language, but I'm going back on mute because I'm happy.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to do that because I think it's an extremely important bill. And it hasn't gotten that much attention in the media, which is totally focused on the issues of affordable housing for people who are looking to purchase property in the city. Okay, well, we're back to the original question here. We've heard from Alderman Gay that he thinks we could be helpful in terms of for those of us who live in wards 2, 3, and 8 to contact representatives there. I personally think it would be good for the commission to have something that we can say collectively and communicate it in that fashion. But we do have a motion on the floor, and that is the motion from Commissioner Hurley. That would basically represent a strong statement by the commission saying that public officials need to move along expeditiously on this issue. It just can't just drag on and drag on and drag on, which I think was your intent. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I had the word properly in there because they do have to follow procedure, but that what is unacceptable is the delay of 14 years from 2009.
Okay. Okay, is there any other ideas, or are there some other ideas which came forward, which I just want to bring back just to see where the commission stands on it? Was a proposal that we have basically a listening project on this, that we collect additional ideas and suggestions from underrepresented populations within the city, individuals who won't come to a public hearing in the city council chambers, but definitely are affected by this. But that would require the commissioners to do a listening project or to hold a hearing. We do have the authority to do that, and do a report based on what we hear. But that needs to be moved along quickly because, as Alderman Gay just reported, they're working very quickly about these 22 amendments, and I think they're going to have something wrapped up pretty soon. That would be my guess. What do folks think about that? I've heard a positive comments that have been made by several commissioners, including Commissioner Hatch and Commissioner Mundy, who think that would be a good idea. And there may be others who thought what that would do is it sort of add some additional teeth to Alderman Hurley's motion. It would basically say this is urgent, and we're going to collect some additional information on this. And secondly, we're going to look, specifically through this legislation to identify any things about it that we think ought to be addressed.
I do have another question, and hopefully Alderman Gay can answer this. The bill in which that he's actually sponsoring, how does that affect individuals who actually live below the poverty line? If he could speak to that.
Definitely. Are you referring to 040 or 050?
Both.
Okay. 050 would offer much more protections because it's direct rental protection, on a case-by-case basis. And, they could go to the board and have their case heard. 04022, I'm so sorry, my apologies. 04022 offers minimal protection. And a part of why that is because when we crafted when we were drafting the legislation, there was only so much that I could do in regards to trying to, negotiate for a much lower income, because I think right now it's at in the amendments is at 60 to 120, and I actually wanted to kind of drop that to about 40 or 50, but we just couldn't get the approval. Really, nobody was on the same page. I just didn't think it was likely to pass in such way. I think the focus for lower income communities is shifted to the C&I grant, honestly, and then that's just me being honest.
I'm sorry, C&I grant?
That's with HACA and the redevelopment of Eastport Terrace and Harbor House.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think as written it would offer any protections, but I'm open to amendments. So please, if you have any suggestions, I'd be more than willing to sit down and have that discussion.
Okay, this,
People.
yeah,
It's-
yeah. Lynn?
People that aren't included in any of this planning because it's either HACA housing or the workforce housing that we are determining at $60,000 or $80,000 salary, right? And then there's all those in between people that are workforce people as well. They may not be teachers, but they, are here and exist and work in Annapolis. And so that's kind of the forgotten piece here, I think. And for me, that's where I feel like we maybe need to focus, is that gap. Who's listening to them? Because we do have a lot of people focused on the HACA stuff. Not that it's functional, but there's a lot of people focus on that. And then this, and maybe what we could do is do that listening campaign for people that are not living in the housing authority properties, and who, perhaps are not making that $60,000 or $80,000 salary, but are working and need housing. Because those are the people that are forgotten right now in all this legislation.
I support both Mr. Hatch and Ms. Mundy's I guess towards having a listening campaign and to hear the voices of those that are in the, I guess, underserved or population. I wonder how long or how quickly that can be done, and I guess how quickly it can be done, knowing that some of these bills are being introduced or somewhat voted on or amended and so on and so forth within that process. Do you have an idea, Mike, as to how quickly a listening campaign can be introduced and requested?
Well, I think we could implement it pretty quickly. I think the question again, I would ask Alderman Gay how quickly he believes, and I know they've got 22 amendments and probably will get more. So this will be a difficult question, but could we get some sense of a timeline as to when this bill is going to come out of his committee and go on to rules? In other words, to get a sense of where we are in the timeline of the process of the legislation. And then, there's still going to be an attempt to hold this thing up until they adopt the Annapolis 2040 comprehensive plan. So there's a certain amount of questions about how long this will be. Alderman Gay, would you want to hazard, we won't hold you to it, a guess as to when you think this is going to be ripe to come out of your committee?
Yeah, I'll have it out of my committee March the 20th. No question. Because we've had it, since its inception. We've had two very, very in-depth conversations on them. The first being November the 17th, and the second was our meeting in February. Actually, we went through all the amendments again, and so we're set. I will have them draft it with the policy analysis, and our committee will approve those the 20th. It'll then go to rules, which meets the first Friday of the month. And I'm sure that they'll probably have it for at least 2 meetings. And so I don't anticipate us really, getting it back to the full council. What's this, March? Until late April. And that's if everything goes well in the committees, with the rules committee, I should add.
Okay, so we should have plenty of time to be able to do a listening project that's aimed at some of the disadvantaged populations within the city. Would you agree with that, Alderman Gay?
I agree, and please let me know if I could be supportive of any way and help in that conversation. We do have a small fund that we are able to use for community forums, etc. And I just think this would be a perfect opportunity to use that. So, let me know how I can help.
Okay. And just another question too, things I've been reading is that the city's comprehensive plan, we're going to have a first draft of that sometime in May with the final draft going to the council in July. So if your legislation is going to be coming out in late April, these things are going to all be happening pretty close together, don't you think? Or do you think that it's going to take a longer time to pass a comprehensive plan than some of those who are saying, I'll be all done by July?
Yeah, we have a meeting on the comp plan, March the 16th, I think it is.
Okay.
And that'll be at our work session, so it'll be live. We'll get updated on that in its entirety and on the timeline. I'm also meeting with Eric this Friday to kind of go over some things. I do think everything will be happening at the same time. And I also think, as you've mentioned a number of times, R123 is out there. And so, I've made it no secret that my committee plans to hold it the entire 90 days that we can, so that we can have the opportunity to discuss 04022 at length, as well as take in the recommendations of the comprehensive plan, which the chief planning director has said 04022 fits the comprehensive plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's an important piece of information. I had read that as well, Alderman Gay, that you plan to basically hold the Alderman Savage's resolution in committee, so that the focus can be on your legislation. Do you have any perspective, and you don't have to answer this if you think it's getting into some private matters, but do you have a perspective of where the mayor's coming down on this? He hasn't signed on to R123, but he hasn't signed on to your bill either. Have you had any conversations with him that you're able to share with the commission?
Well, yeah, we've definitely talked about things, but I think publicly he's been very supportive of the bill. He voted on it on first reader and made comments in regards to supporting affordable housing as well. I think his bigger thing is, what is the council going to agree on? And I respect that 100%, is trying to, play it down the middle. And so I think he's giving us an opportunity to deliberate the amendments, and he'll just jump in once it's done.
Okay. Okay. What I'd like to propose to the commission is that we act on Chuck Hurley's motion, but add it to say that the commission shall undertake a listening project in communities in the city that may not have been polled earlier or had their voices heard earlier on the issue of workforce/affordable housing in the city. In other words, we'll have to do something. We basically will have a project. And from what we're hearing from Alderman Gay is, I think we've got sufficient time to do this. I don't think this has to go on and on. I think there's a good chance that this matter is going to easily go into April or even later before there's any kind of final action on 04022. So basically what I'm offering is a suggested addition to Alderman Hurley's motion. Do you accept that, Alderman? Do you accept that, Chuck?
I do. I'm not sure what we're going to learn that wasn't presented to the city council, but if that's a compromise, I could go with that.
Yeah, well, I'm hearing
I would hope that it would be with a deadline, Mike. I mean, that it's not to extend beyond, certainly not beyond July, and it should occur hopefully in 90 days, something like that.
No, I would say a deadline for the completion. That would be a report as well. I would say a commission set a deadline of May 1st.
I would say June 1st.
June 1st?
Yeah, because I think I I think any information, any data that we collect with this population of people that live in Annapolis that are not being heard, any data we collect is going to be useful. I don't think we should be completely pressured by timing and all
Yeah.
of that
Okay,
for us to do it. And I'm starting to write down names of people, that I know that I'm going to start calling, and I'm going to ask them, what people that live in subsidized housing, what keeps you from moving? What are some of the obstacles? What do you need so that you can move out of, move your family out of this housing? But that's the thing, that there's no in-between housing. So none of this is even being addressed. And this may be a whole separate thing, right? Because we're talking about the workforce housing, but I'm concerned that we're missing a whole population of people that live in public and subsidized housing too, that may be wanting to move, so anyhow, I
we
think
can make it, we can make it to June. I'm thinking of 3 members of our commission who have spoken out very pointedly on this and very forcefully, is Commissioner Hatch, Commissioner Williams, and you, Commissioner Mundy. And I'm certainly willing to join this effort as well, because I think this will give some specific document material that I'm not sure has been captured in the public hearings, and I'm not sure that it's actually been the people who could really be affected by this effort to provide more affordable housing in the city. I think there are some individuals whose voices have not been heard. So I would definitely agree with Commissioner Hatch and Commissioner Mundy on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and I know that, everyone's going to be limited in terms of time, but I would like to call on you three to, and I'm talking here about Commissioners Hatch, Mundy, and Williams, if we could get together to identify a way of doing this and getting this thing wrapped up by June. And it'll be a listening project in which people will be invited to come and just talk about their feelings about housing affordability in the city. But it will focus on individuals who are parts of the community who are, for a variety of reasons, disadvantaged. And whose voices have not been heard in this process. And I think that's a real good way of approaching it. It's consistent with what the Human Relations Commission does. So we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Hurley, and I'm basically amending it to call for a commission listening project on this issue. The motion has been made and seconded. Diane, is what I am proposing also acceptable to you? Okay, you originally seconded. Okay, all right. I have to make sure the second would hold.
Fine.
Okay. Is there any other discussion of this matter? We've got some other agenda items we need to get to tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the roll. Those who favor the motion say aye. Those opposed, nay. You can abstain. And I'm just going to go around on this to get everyone. So I'm going to start with, let's see, Commissioner Leach.
Yeah, great. I'll vote for it a little bit reluctantly, but I'll say
But your vote is yes.
yes.
Okay.
And you have here
Commissioner Sims, Commissioner Ida Mae Sims.
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Graham.
Who laughing at me?
Commissioner Graham.
Yes.
Diane, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Hurley.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner Kachmar.
Yes.
Commissioner Mundy.
Yes.
Commissioner Hatch,
Yes.
Commissioner Moody.
Yes.
Okay, I think I have covered everyone except me, and I vote yes. So we can, although the minutes, oh, no, I did forget, Commissioner Ketchmar.
No, you had me.
I had
Yes.
you. Okay, good. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anyone. Okay, the motion passes unanimously, and it will be so recorded in the minutes. Thank you, Alderman Gay, for giving us the insights that you have. They are extremely valuable. So thank you so much for joining us. We recognize that you've got a lot of things going on, and so really appreciate your contributions to our meeting this evening. The next item on the agenda will be a short report, but I think it's an important report. And that is an update on SB 285. It's a bill in the Maryland General Assembly that would give investigative authority and other powers to the police accountability boards in the state. Just a report on this, a brief report in terms of where this stands. The legislation has been assigned to the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. There was a hearing last month on the bill. Attending that hearing were representatives from the Maryland Coalition on Police Accountability and the Anne Arundel Coalition on Police Accountability, both favoring the strengthening of the police accountability boards and their power. The bill has not, its status is the same as we speak tonight. It's in committee. The hearing has been held. There's been just one individual who is sponsoring it, and that is Senator Carter is sponsoring the bill. Senator Sarah, I'm trying to remember our state senator, Elfreth, Senator Elfreth, who represents the city of Annapolis. She does not serve on the Judicial Proceedings Committee. And as a consequence, at this point in the process, there isn't a whole lot that she would be able to do on it. If we asked her, she would say, well, it's in judicial proceedings and I'm waiting to see what comes out and da. Members of the General Assembly learned very early in their terms the rather Byzantine way that the Maryland General Assembly operates. And that is, it's very committee focused. You do not want to get in front of a bill that the committee chair feels that this is the committee's responsibility and da. There's another factor is that there is no crossover bill in the House of Delegates as we speak. That doesn't mean that it can't pass. A lot of legislation passes in the last week or so of a General Assembly session, and the crossover occurs very quickly. But there's only one member of the General Assembly whose name is on SB 285. Just one. And so we have to wait and see what happens to the bill in committee, and it'll be up to the various coalitions that are supporting this bill to try to bring about support for the bill for those who have representatives in those specific districts. We don't in Annapolis, but that's pretty much where that legislation stands. Right now, the process is ongoing, and we have to wait and see what happens in judicial proceedings. It's very important what happens in that committee. If judicial proceedings votes it out unfavorably, it's dead. That's as simple as that. It will not pass this session. So, and the kind of role that we have at this process is sort of limited. Now, Commissioner Mundy did share with me links to the hearings that were held on this bill. If there are any commissioners who would like to listen to the hearings, please let me know, and I will forward the links or the link to you if you'd like to hear exactly what was said at the hearing by those testifying for or against the legislation, and the like. Commissioner Mundy, do you have anything to add on this?
I guess I'm just curious. I know that the HR Commission is a member of the the Anne Arundel Police Accountability Coalition.
We
So
are.
I'm wondering, is anybody going to their monthly meetings and kind of staying on top of that? Because I think it would be important. I know their next meeting is March 22nd.
Are you interested in serving in that capacity?
I'm not right now. The reason I know about all of this is because I'm serving with Showing Up for Racial Justice. And so a couple members there are very strong in this. But it's just, I'm also helping them do some
Yeah.
base building. So it's too much.
Okay, no, that's understandable. Absolutely.
Before.
Well, if there are anybody, yeah, Commissioner Hurley.
Just 2 quick points, Mike. Last meeting, Linda called me from the coalition saying that my statement was not accurate. That I said that I had drawn back some because of the coalition had taken action at members at officials' homes. Apparently, that was voiced by an individual. The coalition took no action. They did, however, appear at County Executive Pittman's campaign event. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Having said that, we are a member of the coalition. I do try to keep track of that. I would support our support of that bill as part of the coalition.
I think that, yeah, I mean, we can pass a resolution of support for it right now. Once again, I think what's really important here is that we communicate anything the commission, the commission is already on record as supporting this. So we support it. I mean, what's important is that if this bill is voted out of committee to the floor, that we contact Senator Elfreth right away and make sure that she understands that we support this legislation, because there'll be a vote on the floor. So that's where our role really becomes important. It'll also become important if there are individuals who are in District 30 on the House side who are asked to vote on this. But I think what I'm hearing Commissioner Mundy ask for is, are we willing to, is there interest among commissioners, even one commissioner, to attend the meetings of the coalition?
I can do that if no one else volunteers, Mike.
You just got it, Chuck. So he definitely, and Chuck's a very good representative for us too. So thank you for doing that. And Linda, I'm sure you've got all the information in terms of who to contact and the like if Chuck doesn't, and you can share that with him, and Chuck can attend those meetings and then report back to us in terms of what he's hearing. Okay. And I will forward to you, Chuck, the information about the hearings that Linda shared with me.
Great, thank you. Right.
All right, our next item on the agenda is an update on the road shows with the county HRC regarding hate crimes and incidents in County Council District 6. So Chuck, I'm going to ask you to report on this. You've been spearheading this one along
Yep.
with Lakeisha.
Lakeisha, yes. This is-
Lakeisha did have to leave. I think folks may have seen her note in the chat. She had to leave. So
This won't take long, Mike. I did, our next effort was to meet with Alderwoman Rhonda Pendell Charles. I was able to have, I think, about a 4-hour coffee with her. She's not able to meet immediately with us, but we'll do so in the future. And I hope to have that set up within the next month.
okay. So you're looking to, you and Lakeisha are looking to have a meeting with.
Right. Yeah, Lakeisha particularly wanted to hear Alderwoman Charles chairs the Public Safety Committee. And of the city council, and Lakeisha particularly wanted to meet with her as well, and we're trying to arrange that.
Okay, all right, we will note that. And our final item on the agenda is to have a report from our representative from the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And I'll call on Najeri. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? I think I asked that last time and I forgot. What is the pronunciation of your first name?
It's Najeri.
Najeri. Okay, so it's phonetic. Do you have anything you'd like to share with us this evening about the work of the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights?
No, at this time we don't have anything.
Well, thank you for attending our meeting, though. Thank you for your
course.
interest and taking part with us.
Of course, we appreciate the work you all do.
Thank you very much. Okay. Just to give you just an update on one final thing, I'm not going to put this in the minutes directly, but I've been working with Tricia to identify a representative from the Annapolis Police Department who will speak at our April meeting on the whole host of issues which we discussed at our February meeting, and getting the police's response to that. That has to do with the whole issue of use of force, as well as the issues regarding whether or how the police would respond to having teams of professionally qualified civilians join them where appropriate, and some other issues as well, specifically the issues that Commissioner Hatch has worked on in terms of the traffic stops issues, and so I'm currently working with Tricia to identify some there. An invitation has been extended to the Annapolis Police because it was stated that the meeting was going to be in April. I didn't expect an immediate response, but I'm going to ratchet up that so that we will have somebody at the April meeting to share their views with us and can speak for the Annapolis Police. Rosemary, I see you wish to be recognized, and you are recognized.
Thank you. I would like to hear about the mental health resources that are available to the police. It's my thing. I'd like to know what resources they have available for checkup, neck up.
That will be a question that we will invite you to ask next week. They'll have an opportunity to talk about it, but if they don't have a complete answer to your satisfaction, you can certainly ask it at that time. But we're going to be covering a whole host of things that we talked about in our last meeting, as well as the work that Commissioner Hatch has been doing in terms of traffic stops. It's been a while since we had this kind of conversation with the police, and hopefully we'll have someone there at our April 3rd meeting.
And Mike, can I ask that we invite the chief himself to meet with us?
Well, actually, I've already extended.
If he's
the invitation.
available.
Yeah, I've actually already extended the invitation. I was specifically given a name of, I believe her name is Miss McCoy. Is that correct?
Yes,
She's a
Rhonda
professional.
McCoy.
Yeah, excuse me, Tricia?
Rhonda McCoy is the
Rhonda
highest
McCoy.
ranking civilian member of the police department. She's a former police major. In
Yeah.
fact,
She speaks for the chief. speaks to
I
the
guess
point.
I would still like to have the chief, but I would defer to others.
Well, yeah, I think what I've done is I've extended the invitation. In fact, I copied the committee. I believe I know I copied the commission on that invitation. So the invitation's out there. At the same time, if she's not able to come for some reason, then we can see if the chief is willing to do it. I guess what I want is to make sure that whoever speaks to us, if it's not the chief, that it be someone who can say that she or he speaks for the department. And
so that's already been cleared up, Mike. I've spoken with the chief, and he feels that Rhonda is the appropriate person to come because she has been heading up the implementation of the police reform legislation and all of the initiatives. So she's considerably more knowledgeable of those efforts.
Yeah, and we are going to, at our last meeting, Chuck had raised the issues of, how we can, prevent something like occurred in Memphis from happening here, and the whole issue of dealing with the training of the police and dealing with issues of the culture of police departments. And see, those are other things that will be addressed at that meeting. And so I think we're going to put a lot of things on the table, and a lot of tough questions, but also recognizing that the police have a very difficult job to do. Very difficult.
Chairman Keller.
Yeah.
I think that it's also still appropriate, to Chuck's point, that we do have the chief of police there, so that he can also represent the department and answer any questions, being the highest ranking member in the police department. I think it's appropriate. He has been there at previous meetings that we've held with the caucus, along with his entire command staff, and I'm sure he would be open to attend. I mean, I can't speak for him, but I'm just basing this off of his prior practices and meeting with the community, that he would be open to attend any meeting that we have.
Okay. Well, as I say, I have extended an invitation to another individual. I wouldn't want to pull back that invitation, but if that individual cannot come for one reason or another, then we will look to extend an invitation to the chief. Tricia, is there any other? Do you think that's a good way of proceeding, or?
I mean, I was just going to offer to have that conversation with both the chief and with Ms. McCoy, if you'd like.
Okay.
To express the desires of the commission.
Okay. All right, if you could do that, would be great. Okay, I hope
be happy
that. Okay, all right, we will do that. The invitation has been extended to Ms. McCoy, but Tricia will, in a conversation, will relate to the chief that we would like to have him here as well. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. That concludes the business that I have on the agenda for this evening. Is there anything else that folks have that you'd like to raise? If not, the time is 8:40 PM. And is there support for adjourning at this time? Is there anyone who opposes adjourning at this time? Hearing none, I wish all of you a good night. I'd like to thank again Mark Hildebrand for handling the technology of Zoom for us, and thank all of the commissioners and others who have joined us for our meeting this night. Our next meeting will be Monday, April the 3rd. So I bid everybody a good night and look forward to working with everyone, and definitely will follow up with specifically with Commissioners Hatch, Monday, and Williams about how we can quickly get done a listening project. And I'll participate in this as well, because I think it's really, really, really important. And then also as well to communicate to members of City Council the essence of the motion made by Chuck Hurley, that we really feel this needs to be addressed urgently. This cannot be swept under the rug for another 20 years or so. The council needs to take action on this. I think the council will take action on this. So